In 2022, we moved our kids to a third world country in the Dominican Republic. And in today's video, I'm going to share how that's going, what we've learned, and 5 things that are better living in a developing nation than back in the US for our kids. Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? I'm Jamie Gruber. I left my high-paying job in 2021 and moved with my family to Punta Cana, Dominican Republic in 2022. And on this channel, I share all of my experiences with you who might be considering a move abroad, a move to DR, wherever it might be. And this topic comes up quite a bit. What about the kids? People are afraid of things like education, healthcare, or even how do I convince my kids? I don't know if they would go. How do I pull them away from their family? I'm going to talk about all of it, including the mistakes we made as a family in getting our kids here and then keeping our kids here after we told them we were only going to come for 1 year. So back in early 2022, this was January specifically, we came down to DR for 1 month. For 2 weeks, we went to Higüey, which is where my wife's family is, and we stayed at my wife's uncle's ranch, way off the beaten path, up in the sticks, which was a lot of fun. And we got to see our kids playing with their little cousins, and even though they didn't speak the language, it was cool to see them interact with one another. And then we went to a resort for 2 weeks just to have a family vacation in Punta Cana. And while we were there, it wasn't one of us or the other one of us. My wife and I both sort of at the same time or had the same sense, like maybe we need to move down here for a little while. So that was January. By August 2022, we made the move. And here's how we did it. I picked a date, August 23rd. For whatever reason, that date had the cheapest flights and I bought 4 of them, one way down to Punta Cana. When we arrived, we thought, there's probably schools here. And we found a few. We went and visited, we chose one and we put our kids in it, but we didn't prepare for any of that before we got here. I mean, I'm joking a little bit. We knew there were schools, but it's not like we had all that done before we left the States. We kind of landed and figured things out after we got here in a lot of ways. And for our kids, this was 1 year. That's what we told them. Hey guys, we're going to move away for 1 year to the Dominican Republic and then we'll come back. Big mistake. Setting that expectation for the kids came back to haunt us when we decided after about a year here that we're not ready to go home just yet. I'll unpack that in just a minute. For context, my kids were 7 and 4, both boys, when we moved down here. So the 4-year-old, when he entered school, was all Spanish-speaking classroom. My 7-year-old, though, was in a mostly English-speaking classroom, and neither of them spoke Spanish. Our little guy, 3 months, he had it. He nailed Spanish. He was mostly fluent 3 to 4 months in, and today he uses it interchangeably, no problem. My 7-year-old, now 8, he learned it, but it took him a little while longer for 2 reasons. One, I mentioned he wasn't in a full Spanish-speaking classroom. And 2, why do I need to learn this? I'm only going to be here a year. You see why this was a mistake? Their little brains absorb it, and he picked it all up in about 6 months, but he was really, really resistant to using it. We rallied around it. We tried to encourage him. We did all the different parenting things, like get him to conclude it's good to have Spanish.
Maybe he'll look cool to his friends back home if he knows how to speak Spanish.
We were trying to sell him on everything. We even hired a tutor to come in and teach him 2 days a week. Again, big mistake. We ended up undoing all of it. We unhelicoptered as parents and we let the kid just be. And it's funny, he actually started learning and using Spanish much more after we just let him be. Flash forward to the almost 1 year mark. My wife and I are talking like, we don't know that this is really the time for us to go back just yet. We had concerns about school shootings. We had concerns about some of the cultural stuff happening in the United States. And on top of that, our kids had learned Spanish. Both of them at this point were fluent, but we felt a year and back, they're going to lose all these skills. Let's let them embed that for 1 more year. And also, we just weren't ready. We looked at it as a 1-year adventure and we weren't ready yet to come back. So now came the hard part. What do we say to our kids? Now look, some out there are going to say, and I agree with you, parents got to make decisions for the family. And I was prepared to do that. I would have done that. That's what my dad did with me. We moved many times. In fact, I went to 5 different schools, 3 of them being in 9th grade, 10th grade, and 11th grade. 3 different schools. I didn't have a choice. I turned out somewhat fine. But it doesn't mean that we didn't want to involve our kids and get their perspective on it. So what I did was I took my 2 boys out to eat. Big one being the real resistant one to wanting to stay because he was told it's a year. The little guy follows the big guy pretty much. I asked him this question. Guys, we're planning on staying longer. What are the conditions that you need? Like, what do you want? What would make it really exciting for you to stay at least another year? My older kid had 2 conditions. First, he didn't want to attend the school he was in anymore. He wanted a different school or no school, like homeschooling. We agreed with him. We didn't love our school, so we had a school teed up that was really, really cool, a really interesting concept that we showed him, and he was pretty excited about it. The second, he wanted to go to our favorite resort, the Grand Palladium, once a month. On that one, I was like, maybe we could do like a day pass every month on a Saturday or something, but we're certainly not going to be going to a resort every month. But I said, buddy, I'll see what I can do. I'll do my best. We can travel and go see different places, but we'll see about the Palladium every month. But the lessons in there were these. One, Don't say a year to your kids. Now, for you might need to say a year or 6 months or whatever to make it not feel so big. In fact, I'd suggest that. If the idea of moving is scary because it feels like forever, commit to a year. But just don't tell your young kids that. Tell them we're going to go for a while and we'll see how it goes. Or we're making a move, we'll check in at a year. Something. That's my suggestion. Second, let the kids have their experience. We really got too ratcheted up on our older kid, trying to kind of force him to integrate and learn the skills of being here and language and the culture and all of that. And the moment we just let him be, he just absorbed it naturally. It sounds so obvious and logical now, but in the moment we felt like we were doing the right thing by helping and supporting him. That was our mistake. One other suggestion I'd make is if you're going to make the move with kids, consider coming down earlier in the summer and enrolling them in a summer camp. If you're looking for one, call any of the schools that I listed in some of my other videos, and they all are associated with or have a summer camp they can recommend for you, and they're all fine. But the kids will get to know other kids, they'll get a little bit of the language skill if they don't have it already, and once they go to school, they'll likely be with at least a few of those kids, so it won't feel so big and scary when they finally get here. Today, the kids are fine. The younger one likes it here a lot. He doesn't remember much of Michigan where we came from because he was 4 and now he's turning 6. The older one holds on to it a little bit. He kind of gives us the,
yeah, no, I'm okay. It's okay
here, but he's not like full-throated endorsement of living here yet, nor is he full-throated endorsement of going back. He's enjoying where he is. He's enjoying his friends. He loves soccer. And he's just naturally, as a kid, becoming more acclimated to the area. But my wife and I had this discussion the other day. We were talking about, wow, do we see a change in our kids? Like, what's the benefit to our kids living here? After all, it's a developing nation. Yes, we live in a developed part of the country, but a lot of the things we need, we can't get here. We have to go to Santo Domingo for certain types of doctors. We get exposure to different parts of the country. We visited and spent time in Jarabacoa, Cabarete, Las Terranas, Puerto Plata, La Romana, a lot of time in Higüey at my wife's family's places. But here's what we feel like they've gained by living in a developing nation. Number one is perspective. My wife and I were talking about this. It's not as if an 8 and 5, soon to be 9 and 6-year-old say, wow, you know what, Mom and Dad, I see the difference between how we live, which is pretty nice, to the kid that's close to my age washing windshields as we stop at a stoplight. They don't say that, but their actions and behaviors show me that as human beings, they're able to absorb like, oh, it's not all like we live. We didn't really have that in the States. Could we go find it? We live near Detroit, sure, but it's in your face here a little bit. Less so in Punta Cana for sure than maybe in some other parts of the country, but we've traveled this country extensively. And even in Punta Cana and some of the neighborhoods we go into for cool restaurants or a charity I support called Second Mile Missions, like those are rough, tough neighborhoods, slums in some cases, and our kids get to see what life is like for people that maybe didn't win the birth lottery like they did. So that sense of entitlement that I feel like maybe kids have that I've met in the States, it just doesn't exist here, at least not with our kids. In addition, especially when we go to my wife's uncle's place, like hot water is a gift. Drinking water has to be bottled. You can't just go to a faucet and turn it on. Like, it's just not as easy here with certain things, and my kids get that perspective. Even in Punta Cana, the water doesn't get hot instantly like some people may think it does. And again, it's a small thing, but my kids, they exist in that. They understand that that's a condition of living here. Another one is flushing toilets in certain parts of the country. Like, you can't, not with toilet paper in it. So my kids have that perspective as well. Just about a month ago, one of the coolest conversations I had with my older kid, I said, hey buddy, did you know that people back from where we lived in the United States feel like where you live is a really dangerous place? And he thought that was ridiculous. Again, we don't bring him into the worst neighborhoods here. We know that there's dangers here. So for the, oh, it's a terrible, dangerous place crowd, like whatever, drop your comment. I'll reply with a whoa or something and move on. But generally speaking, these kids are just existing here. They don't see danger. They see their day-to-day life, no matter where they go. Even if we go through rough neighborhoods or rough towns, they're just living their life. Dangerous feels big, and they're right. But if you're an American with a perspective on a country like DR, which is considered to be the third world, or I like to say a developing nation, my kids have a perspective that even adults don't have, that they may be closed-minded to, that we live in a place that's not dangerous. It's just another place on this beautiful planet of ours. So perspective. That's a biggie, and we've seen our kids benefit from that. The second one is community. We met a couple recently, you know who you are, at a local foodie park. And we got to talking. They had followed me on Instagram, and we got to chatting about the experience of living here as they were trying to move here. And one thing that they said was like, man, we moved into this beautiful neighborhood in the town that we live in the States because all the kids live there. We wanted our kids to have access to the other kids, but none of them are outside. She's like, so my kids are just home. They're not able to go play with other kids. And this is where I always check in with my wife. One day she'll come on and she'll share with you, but for right now, I'm sharing my perspective, and I tend to be sunny, optimist, la-di-da guy. So when I say something, I kind of look at my wife to say, like, am I right or am I just being too optimistic? And I said, oh my God, we have kids at our house all the time. And she just nodded, yes. And even further to the point. In fact, that day earlier, the neighbors across the street, their kids were over playing with our kids. Like, kids are always together here. In fact, there's so many damn birthday parties. It's ridiculous. I even feel bad inviting kids to our kids' birthday parties because the parents have to go to yet another one. But Dominicans love a celebration, man. So 5-year-old birthday parties, let's go. But that sense of community, that sense of kids playing with other kids and being out and running around, and for my older kid, he can just kind of go. He goes where he needs to go. He comes back when it's dark. Like, that's a really, really cool feature of living here. Again, many think it's a third world. There are third world elements, but there's a lot of developed world here as well. Not just in Punta Cana either. But maybe one of those things that's cool about developing versus developed is that kids still play with one another. And that's our experience here. The third one kind of plays off the last one, and that is the amount of freedom our kids have. There's a little bit of this where our kids are a little older than when we had them in the States, so maybe our need to protect them feels like it's less. But just comparing how we are with our kids versus our friends and their kids back in the States, here there's a little bit more of like a go do you thing. Like I said earlier, when we were rallying around my oldest son, bringing him in tutors, that was a very American approach for us. Like, let's help him fix it. Let's bring him support. And we realized, like, he's just got to be. Let him go. And he learned the language and he's done what he's done. We go to the beach every Sunday, most Sundays, with some friends and their kids, and our kids are just gone. We don't know where they are. We can't see them. It's not like that doesn't happen in the States, but there feels like there's a little bit more of a check-in or a sense of needing to see where everybody is. Not the case so much here. So that freedom, it's just a little bit, but it's something I've noticed. It feels a little bit less tethered here than it does in the United States right now. The fourth one is care. Specifically, I'm talking about doctors, hospitals, medical care, as well as education. In the private system in both medical and education, there's nothing lost here compared to the United States. You might put a kid in a public hospital or public school in the US, and those are acceptable. They're great. We used to use those. And here, private is what anybody with any means, which is you watching, is able to use. This is where somebody goes on a rant about, like, well, people, average Dominicans make $400. Average Dominicans speak Spanish and are low income. They're not following me. They're not watching right now. So if you're watching, you're saying, I make $60, $80, $200, $300,000 a year, and I want to move there at some point. Maybe I want to work remotely and bring my family, and I'm Dominican. Yeah, that's you. You'll pay for private here. Private education, private healthcare, you won't see any kind of degradation. There's exceptions to that, of course, specifically on the medical side, I think, meaning if there were really major issues like cancer or heart disease or something like that, I probably would want a specialist from the US. Maybe that's my own bias being American, but beyond that, everything else we found to be on par, if not better, than the United States. But the point here is care. When we go to a doctor with our kids, we're not being rushed out for the next appointment for that doctor to collect the next insurance check. It's not a hurried multitask sort of situation. There's time spent with us. They're talking to us. We're talking about our kid, what can be done, this, that, and the other. The same with school. Our teachers are on our side. We're on their side. We're all rallied around. We're our kids' team to try to help them get to wherever they're trying to get to. There's no contentiousness. There's no union between us. There's none of that. Care. That's the word I'd like to use. Here's a quick example. My wife uses a chiropractor up by Hard Rock. I don't know his name. People are going to ask, like, I don't know anything. Like, I don't even know the name of the gym I go to every day. My wife laughs at me about this. I just float through life. But anyway, he does like 30 to 45 minutes worth of treatment because he does a full like massage of an area and then does the pop or whatever. In the States, we go to a chiropractor and it's like 7 minutes in and out. They're just looking to get to the next one, make the next check. Care. We've seen that for our kids. Education, medical care. There's actually more of a human touch in those two different areas here that we feel is a little lost and more process related in the States, Canada, wherever you might be from. Be curious on that one. Does that resonate with you? I don't know. Maybe I'm being too airy-fairy on this. Maybe I'm being too head in the clouds. Somebody's going to think so, but somebody always thinks I'm in the clouds. But what do you think? I'm wondering what you think. Drop it down in the comments. And here's the last one. Living in a developing nation, the fifth thing that we like about what we have for our kids. And this is specific to Punta Cana. Gets a rap for being a tourist hub. And it is. Most of the tourism comes through here. But people make it seem, though, like there's not community here. It's like 100,000 people that live in this area. So there's a lot of amenities for kids. There's theme parks, water parks, indoor playgrounds, outdoor playgrounds, soccer clubs, taekwondo, tai chi, piano classes, swimming lessons, you name it. Our kid's on a traveling soccer team. In fact, we're going to go to Bogota, Colombia to play in a travel league. Think about that. My kid, if we ever move back to the States or whatever, is going to be able to go to another kid that lives in Michigan or New York or Boston or wherever we come back to. And that kid's be like,
Man, I'm on a travel team out here in Boston. We gotta go out to Western Mass, man. That's how far we go for travel.
my kid's going to be able to,
Like, yeah, I was on a travel team in the Dominican Republic. We played in Bogota, Peru, Argentina, which are all on the docket.
that's pretty cool for an 8, 9-year-old kid to experience. It's expensive for me though. Maybe that's not such a good thing. My point, though, is there's amenities for family, amenities for community. They exist here. Now, if you're wondering where to live from a community standpoint, what's the best for families, I'll give you 2 spots. First one, Punta Cana Village. It's the most expensive family community here, but it's incredible. Secondarily, there's Ciudad La Palma. It's not far from the village, and it's way less expensive, but has a great family-friendly community. As a third one, you can go to Ciudad Las Canas, right outside of Cap Cana's gates. It's still developing, but it's got more of the potential of being a family hub there as well. There's other places, Ciudad del Sol, Costa Cana, Vista Cana's turning into that, Cocotal, and others, but those are the ones that I believe are the best family fits. If I think about in 2 years what has happened, my kids have gotten the exposure to another language, they've got connected to their family, and the experience of living somewhere other than just the United States, which I love. God bless the USA. I was born there. I'm a patriot. And I also love the fact that we get to give them an experience living outside the country for as long as we decide to be here. To go to my wife's uncle's ranch and see my kids just disappear and come back with cacao beans and mangoes and playing with these chickens that are there and feeding bunnies and all of that stuff is super, super cool. Again, not that that doesn't exist in the States, but there's just something unique and different. There's an energy here. There's a vibe here that really resonates with me, my wife, my kids. And it's been fun to watch them play around with it. The last thing I'll tell you that's really cool is all about education. In fact, just watch this video. It'll tell you all you need to know. Have a good one.